quality. Gentlemen, it's Adam from LUCIDPIXUL, and you might be wondering why I did that unbox therapy style opening to this video. It's because this is the first time, with the exception of maybe the Lord of the Rings trilogy books, that I've unboxed and unveiled a book that put this much attention to the physical presentation and the tactile experience of actually reading the book. I think this is absolutely beautiful. It came in that beautiful hard case, that sheath, but the book itself has this lovely kind of like bamboo spine to it, which you might be able to see here. Hopefully you'll be able to see it if I can get it in focus. It'll probably be impossible to get in focus. Okay, see that beautiful relief to it. So you can actually feel this. It's absolutely beautiful. And what we have inside, this doesn't cover up the fact that what's inside this book is absolutely beautiful. And I might add, an excellent example, if you're a fellow artist like myself, of a portfolio, an artistic portfolio done right. How this book is laid out, how it's designed, how the characters are presented is, in my opinion, one of the most perfect examples of portfolio presentation. The kind of information that you can share with a director or with an employer that might just get you a job if you follow this. And this book very much follows the very traditional aspects of portfolio, character, and environment presentation as far as that goes. So let's crack this open. It's an absolutely gorgeous book. And just to mention right off the bat, I want to say this before I even move forward into the book. I own the game. I purchased the game and I've played around 7 or 8 hours of it so far. I haven't gotten that far into the game because work keeps on calling me away from gaming as far as that goes. But my friend Tyler Edlin, if you're listening from Brush Sauce Theater, if you're listening, I want my friend Tyler to do a book review, because I've never in my life met a more obsessive Ghost of Tsushima fan than him. He even went and bought himself the hat and the whole bit last time we did the art contest together. So Tyler, if you're listening, I expect this soon, all right? Because I want to hear it from a real like crazy diehard fan that never shuts up about this book. I am a fan too. I just don't have as much experience with the game as he does just yet. But what I can tell you is this is probably one of the most artistically ambitious games I've played. This ranks on top with games like Dark Souls series and with Horizon series, all of those. It is an artistic masterpiece. And if you follow it, if you're aware of like film directing and everything like that, it's very, very heavily inspired by a very admittedly inspired by the artworks and the cinematography style of Akira Kurosawa. There's a video that I'm going to link for you called Composing Movement that you can find on YouTube by one of my favorite YouTube channels for film documentary and stuff like that, called Every Frame a Painting. And he has a whole documentary where he covers exactly what it is we're going to be looking at in this book in depth. The uniqueness in the style of Akira Kurosawa's work, where he always composes movement in his shots. Petals, rain, smoke, moving characters, fans, chimes. There's always some kind of a movement. And he captured this gorgeously, albeit maybe a little bit on steroids, in this game. Okay? And right off the bat, you get what they're establishing right off the bat is this beautiful painterly style of art. Despite the fact that this is done digitally, I can tell that this is done digitally, it very much has that oil paint smear type of approach to it. An absolutely beautiful use of subtle colors. This game is a painting, just in case you haven't played it yet. It's literally a painting. And if you can play this on a big 4K screen, the bigger the better, in my humble opinion. Not to mention the music design is something else. Now, a little bit of splash art to get us into it, and you can tell in this piece, you can tell just from an artistic perspective, that there's a photo plate used in this. This wasn't drawn directly, strictly from somebody's head, that there's some paint over aspects in here and a little bit of a blurry background, which is probably indicative of some kind of a photo texture, albeit done beautifully. You can compare this to games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You can check it out right here. And a lot of other games that I've reviewed that very much follow this premise. Some people do it a little bit more quickly. than others. In this particular case, it's an example of the implementation of photographic plates that aim to enhance, but the artists themselves did a lot of beautiful work to produce an image that was this gorgeous. Right off the bat, you're thrown right into the middle of a war. And you're thrown right into the brutality of war, which I feel they captured beautifully in this. The mud, the dead bodies, the very unforgiving landscape. And right away, you're kind of getting thrown into some different leveling of character designs in here. And we're going to jump right into character design right away. Now, this is what I was talking about. If you're an artist, pay very close attention to how they've gone about designing the main character, okay? And when you're looking at Jin Sakai's different outfits over here, you'll notice that there's a good variation of different outfits to give us a different taste of different possibilities in how he could be designed. I very often, working as a director, would interview character designers, where they would have these kind of layouts of different characters where they cut and paste the same body, but they would slap different clothes on it. But very often the clothes, the patterns, and the overall shapes of them would be very, very samey. So there's only these tiny little micro adjustments, micro differences between one and another. And that's not substantial enough to generate conversation. Where in this particular case, you've got so many different variations in the silhouette and the character, a single pauldron, a double pauldron, or here the different beautiful, really diverse different textures of these different outfits, both feed the character design department, the modeling department, but also help to generate a lot of content for people to be able to pick and choose that which they like. If you're looking over here, again, if you're an art student, if you've studied concept art, then this layout might be very familiar to you. Very skillful huntsman technique on capturing the silhouettes and overall forms. All done very graphically in black and white to give you a very strong graphic read on what these look like. Absolutely love this. This is probably the prime example of that done right. And here's some more character designs over here. Now, same thing applies to weapon design. Look at the grand variety of different weapons. Confided, these are weapons that you find in the game. There's a huge variety of upgrades that you can get. My personal favorite type of game. I'm very much, being an artist, I'm very much caught up and enjoy games based on the different looks that my character can get. I find that very often, like a game that I absolutely adore, Sekiro, one of the drawbacks for me personally was the fact that you didn't really get to experience the visual upgrade of the character of Sekiro, albeit everything else about the game is an actual masterpiece, which takes away from the whole upgrade element of it and kind of makes you more of character and environment type of connection, which I can respect very much. But I like changing the looks of things. I like refreshing things, and this really gives you a lot of variety as far as that goes. You can see as I flip through other examples here, you can see a lot of variety. They were really focusing on variety. And the other thing too to mention here is look at the courage in terms of color. Color is something that we very often tend to be shy with. We tend to rely solely on things that are black and white or things that are very monochromatic because we fear disharmony. And when it comes to things like this, I really, as an artist, I want to emphasize, and as an art teacher, I'd like to emphasize the importance of pushing your limits artistically when it comes to color. Force yourself out of your comfort zone, because color isn't only something that you want to achieve harmony with it. Color is something that opens you up to different possibilities. And when you start to explore color in a very brave way like this, you start to expose yourself to artistic elements and artistic aesthetics that you otherwise wouldn't consider. Because there's so much variety, there's so much possibility. So I really suggest exploring like this. You'd be surprised how far you can push color before it actually gets offensive. I love this design over here. Very reminiscent, it makes me think a lot of Final Fantasy design. It's kind of got this kind of modular type of outfit, which I find beautiful. A lot of natural fabrics. Look at this, despite it being very monochromatic and dark, we still got a lot of beautiful balanced splashes of color, albeit somewhat monochromatic with a little bit of a hint of some teal. But look at all these beautiful yellows with a little hint of teal. This little accent color. Very tastefully done. Same thing here. Predominantly blues with a little accent of teal and a little bit of gold. Lovely. When you're looking at Ronin, you can see by the color choices, the deep browns and the blacks, that he's meant to be a little bit more of a neutral character, less of a character that's standing out. So there's a little bit less vanity in his appearance. He's focusing a lot more on just kind of, you can see he's more of a practical character in that regard. Somebody who's not trying to scream for your attention. Even the silhouette, you'll notice, is a little bit more neutral. When it comes to the vendors, Something very important to note, something I've mentioned multiple times in different book reviews like Big Hero 6 or Blade Runner 2077. 2049. Oops. That's a cyberpunk thing. 2049. Secondary characters, secondary props and vehicles and environmental elements. Remember that not everything is designed to steal your attention. Not everything is top priority. So when it comes to vendors or secondary characters, you want them to be able to be iconic enough that you can pick them out. Like for instance, in Horizon Zero Dawn, you always have the vendors that have certain headdresses or something like that that draw attention to them. So you know that you're actually looking at a vendor. But they're not important characters. They're not deities. They're not gods. They're not kings or queens. They're neutral characters. So a very neutral silhouette and neutral tones is very important so that you can set this kind of hierarchical priority in your design. And this helps to flesh out a lot more designs, gives a lot more depth to what you're doing. Not everything needs to be super epic. Soldiers, very samey, very neutral tones, earth tones, so that they don't draw too much attention to themselves. But again, look at this as an artistic lesson. Very neutral, very subdued colors with these little accents of teal, these little accents of red. I love these little accents of color. I find that incredibly tasteful. It's interesting too, just taking what I just said, what I was just explaining with regards to color. There are several peasants out here that do stand out in the fray. They're not all neutral. Now, why do these peasants stand out where the merchants didn't? Because color variety creates a heightened sense of variety. If all of the peasants are all wearing exactly the same neutral colors like blacks and grays and browns, and they don't really stand out, it can feel as though there aren't many of them, or it can get very drab. So the whole purpose of peasants is as fillers in an environment. So by seeing these little plays of color everywhere, it gives a little bit more of a sense of variety in the environment. When we get into the main bad guy, and this guy's a real, excuse my French, dick. When you get into the bad guy, you'll notice I notice a very common trend in how they're very often portrayed. I just happened to purchase the original movie 300. I didn't own it, so I decided to purchase it, and just out of respect for the directors, just to give them a little bit of extra cash. But villains are very often described as being very vain. It's a narcissism. It's a flamboyancy. It's a focusing on oneself type of personality, like Xerxes from 300. And in Khan's case, it's the same thing. His attire is meant to draw attention to these rich royal reds and these golds and these shiny blingy things, and he's presented very early on in the game, right in the very early cutscenes, as being this guy who has no honor. He's all about just winning. And so he has absolutely no qualm, as opposed to the samurai code of an honorable death and an honorable kill. He'll cheat. He doesn't give a shit. And it's this whole vanity that I find that's very indicative of the kind of state that we live in politically right now, where if you look at different leaders and stuff like that, what their main focus is and how they present themselves public is a very good indication of where their heart lies. And this is well portrayed in the case of Khan. Notice that all the secondary characters are a bit of a slightly dumbed down version of the leader. They all have the bulk, they all have a little bit of bling, they all have the pointy hats, they're all like very much trying to be a reflection of their leader, but they're not allowed to outshine him. So the colors are less vibrant, there's more subdued yellows and monochromatic colors versus the shiny reds and contrasts. All of these are it's excellent visual food for you as potentially as an artist, to help to feed your design ideas and to give your color choices and your graphic choices a little bit more of a sense of direction and purpose. You can see very clearly by the addition of red. Red being a very royal color. Depending on the culture you're from, it can be purples in certain cultures and reds in different colors and golds in others. You can see here that addition of red gives this character a little bit more visual authority. It makes them a little bit higher up on the echelon of power as far as that goes. And one of the design elements that I think are just absolutely freaking gorgeous are these beautiful kind of almost silver shields with these little hints of red poking through, or these little, the way they integrated the use of red into these. I just find that absolutely gorgeous. And these designs are kind of like, it's kind of like a more refined, matured version of the highest tier archer set in Skyrim. I can't remember what it's called. The Daedric, I think? The Daedric Armor set. which I thought was one of my favorite armor sets of all time. This is kind of reminiscent of it, but it's a little bit more of a mature design. And I love these beautiful uses of grays and a little bit of age and dirt on this. Again, these little accents. The main color with a little bit of a contrasting accent. And the other one you noticed was a little bit more silvery with red, but since this is using white accents, they went with a little bit more of a gold brass type of color to it. And again, look at these gorgeous little accents of color. Little accent of color. That's all you need sometimes. Just that little splash to make it feel a little bit more important. In Lord of the Rings, I remember them describing Frodo, to distinguish Frodo, his status at the Shire, compared to, for instance, Samwise Gamgee or Merry and Pip, is that Frodo came from a little bit more wealth. The Baggins family were a little bit wealthier. So Frodo wore a little bit of a silk tunic underneath to give him a little bit more of a vain look to him, just to kind of bump him up a little bit. Now we get into environment design. And when it comes to environment design, this is where Akira Kurosawa's influence really kicks in. You can see what they influenced themselves by. And one of the things that very often as artists we take for granted is the fact that we're not just painting a static environment. The earth, the air is moving, it's alive. There's always elements of movement going on. So either you have characters moving, or you have straps floating in the wind, some feathers floating off the hat, or some fabric billowing. Even Miyazaki, Hidetaka Miyazaki, who produced Dark Souls, made it a very strong point that all of the characters had flowing fabric, flowing fur. Everything had to have a sense of movement. In this particular case, they put a lot of that emphasis on the environment itself. So everywhere you go, it's even a game mechanic where the wind blows all the flower petals and leaves, and that directs where you've got to go. An absolutely brilliant game mechanic. You don't have arrows pointing where to go, you follow the breeze, which is a much more poetic thing. And it's a game that's based around following the environment and being physically engaged, emotionally aware of your environment. The wind blowing, the birds flying off in the distance that you have to chase. There's always these different moments, things that are pulling your attention. And it's very much in my thoughts from an artistic perspective, an analogy for real life, where exploration and discovery is very often starting with an idea and allowing your thoughts to pull you off in a different direction, allowing your mind to flow like a breeze. I know it sounds very poetic what I'm saying, but that's very much what discovery and learning is. One of the main reasons why Neil deGrasse Tyson advocated for going to a library versus Google. Because when you go to a library, you go through the Rolodexes of cards, and as you're flipping through the index, looking for the book that you're looking for, you might bump into something you didn't expect. And it's these unexpected discoveries that very often don't only send you off on tangents of learning, but often define you as a person. And this is very much how this game functions. It functions in a very organic way that pulls you in different directions. Even some nice moody interiors. We have a little bit of that, little bit of smoke and fog that's wafting in, that's catching the light. Different moods, different times of day, a little bit of fog, these beautiful little broken branches, these dead leaves next to these pine trees in the background, some reflections in the water, all nicely emphasized by this little shaft of light that comes right down the middle here. And again, they did it right here at the bottom, pulling the eye into the middle. Despite having a very ultra-wide kind of shot here, your eye is pulled right down into the dead center. A very small composition in an otherwise large environment. That's known as, in a sense, subframing. Now, as I flip through these pages, I'm going to flip through them one at a time. You're going to notice something. You're going to notice that they're putting a lot of emphasis on different climates. So they had to take that same environment and transform it into different climates. And by creating different climates, you're also creating different opportunities for atmosphere. Snow, fog, leaves, steam, smog, all of these different elements that play into it to give you this moving environment. And it's really, this is where I feel, even if the gameplay itself sucked, which it doesn't, it's absolutely amazing. It's very, if you haven't played it yet, it's very similar to Assassin's Creed. It's got a very Assassin's Creed kind of feel to it, albeit some differences, of course. But it's this absolutely artistic, immersive environment. The act of traveling, because there's so much traveling involved, it never feels boring and mundane. It always feels alive. The environment always feels alive. You always feel like you're somewhere. You're not just going from one random location to another. You really feel like you're experiencing this whole trip, which to me is probably one of the most meaningful things. Look at this. Look at this beautiful splash of colors with these beautiful blue flowers and little wisp of some birds, all with that very loose painterly type of brushstroke, all done digitally, I might add. I want to end on this beautiful piece of traditional Japanese art, some of which I have on my wall right here, a gift from one of my former students, Takatero Ito from Japan, and his beautiful wife Chisa as well. So thank you again, Taka. Because I want to just mention this one last thing. Of course, I can't make this review 16 hours long. It wasn't until very recently that video games were officially considered a work of art. Up until that point, they were just considered entertainment. And as such, it opened artists' minds up too and gave them permission to express themselves in a far deeper, more meaningful way. And one of the things that I think is very often taken for granted, particularly for people who don't play games often enough, is what an amazing resource for artistic learning that games can be. Sometimes they're just an addictive distraction, I get that. But then you get a game like this that validates the artistic process in a game. And it's for that very reason that I am incredibly grateful, not only happy that this very fun game exists, but I'm very grateful that true artists can contribute to this medium of video games, because I think that there's a lot more potential. The fact that we can interactively live in a work of art like Ghost of Tsushima, I think makes it entirely worthwhile for me and for everybody else who plays. You're leaving a very meaningful mark on the history of our species. So to that, I thank you very much for joining me. Again, if you want to check out the rest of the book, you can find the link in the description below. I love you all, and I'll see you soon. Take care.